may be seated. The Holy Gospel according to St. John, the 9th chapter. Glory to you, O Lord. As Jesus walked along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him,
Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?
Jesus answered,
Neither this man nor his parents sinned. He was born blind so that God's works might be revealed in him. We must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world.
When he had said this, he spat on the ground and made mud with the saliva and spread the mud on the man's eyes, saying to him,
Go, wash in the pool of Siloam,
which means sent. Then he went and washed and came back able to see. The neighbors and those who had seen him before as a beggar began to ask,
Is this not the man who used to sit and beg?
Some were saying,
It is he.
Others were saying,
No, but it is someone like him.
and the blind men kept saying,
I am the man.
but they kept asking him.
Then how were your eyes open?
He answered,
The man called Jesus made mud, spread it on my eyes, and said to me, Go to Siloam and wash. Then I went and washed and received my sight.
Where is he?
I do not know.
They brought to the Pharisees the man who had formerly been blind. Now it was a Sabbath day when Jesus made the mud and opened his eyes. Then the Pharisees also began to ask him how he had received his sight. He said to them,
He put mud on my eyes. Then I washed, and now I see.
Some of the Pharisees said,
This man is not from God, for he does not observe the Sabbath.
but others said,
How can a man who is a sinner perform such signs?
and they were divided. So they said again to the blind man,
What do you say about him? It was your eyes he opened.
He is a prophet.
The Jews did not believe that he had been blind and had received his sight until they called the parents of the man who had received his sight and asked them,
Is this your son, who you say was born blind? How then does he now see?
His parents answered,
We know that this is our son and that he was born blind, but we do not know how it is that now he sees. Nor do we know who opened his eyes. Asked him. He is of age. He will speak for himself.
His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jews. For the Jews had already agreed that anyone who confessed Jesus to be the Messiah would be put out of the synagogue. Therefore his parents said, He is of age, ask him. So for the second time they called the man who had been blind, and they said to him,
Give glory to God. We know that this man is a sinner.
I do not know whether he is a sinner. One thing I do know, that though I was blind, now I see.
What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes?
I have told you already, and you would not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you also want to become his disciples?
Then they reviled him, saying,
You are his disciple, but we are disciples of Moses. We know that God has spoken to Moses. But as for this man, we do not know where he comes from.
Here's an astonishing thing. You do not know where he comes from, and yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners, but he does listen to one who worships him and obeys his will. Never since the world began has it been heard that anyone opened the eyes of a person born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing.
You were born entirely in sins, and you are trying to teach us.
And they drove the blind man out. Jesus heard that they had driven him out, and when Jesus found him, he said,
Do you believe in the Son of Man?
And who is he, sir? Tell me, so that I may believe in him.
You have seen him, and the one speaking with you is he.
Lord, I believe.
And he worshipped him. Jesus said,
I came into this world for judgment, so that those who do not see may see, and those who do see may become blind."
Some of the Pharisees near him heard this and said to him,
Surely we are not blind, are we?
"If you were blind, you would not have sin. But now that you say, 'We see,' your sin remains."
The Gospel of the Lord. Have you ever heard the phrase, "Don't ask how the sausage gets made"? You heard that? Means that if you want to keep eating sausage, then you probably don't want to know how it gets made. There's no need to peek behind the curtain. That stuff should just stay a secret. But as I look around here, many of you here know how to make sausage, so maybe this isn't as relevant. I kind of think it pertains more to hot dogs, probably, because, well, I've heard how those are made, and I want to keep eating them, so I'm not really digging into that. Basically, we're better off not knowing how this stuff works, because once we do, we'll know too much and not want to eat it or do whatever more. Again, though, I think this can be different for so many different situations. Maybe you've heard of the musical Hamilton, which has been around, just less than 10 years at this point. It's a musical about Alexander Hamilton and all the founding fathers as they are fighting to start the United States. And there's a song in the middle of this musical called "The Room Where It Happens." And it's a song that tells us about some deals that are being made between some of the higher-ups as they are working on and creating the documents that are going to shape this new government and our new country. Some of the lyrics of that song say, "No one really knows how the game is played, the art of the trade, how the sausage gets made. We just assume that it happens, but no one else is in the room where it happens." That song goes on to tell us how Hamilton and others with him want to be in the room where it happens. They want to be a part of this whole process and all the negotiating and the deal making. They want to know what's happening and have input in it. And there's probably a lot of that same sentiment today among us. Some would probably think that the workings of government and policy making seem so complex and complicated that we should leave it behind closed doors and let the ones who get it do it. Yet there's a lot of others who maybe don't trust what's going on behind those closed doors, or we've been told not to trust what happens back there. Whether out of a sense of mistrust or simply needing to know how every little thing works, we humans have been formed into a people who need to know it all, especially in order to believe it's true, except when it comes to eating hot dogs. But I've been wrestling a bit with this, how it pertains to our faith and how it shapes our faith. Think about what we heard in the story of Samuel as he was seeking out a new king to replace Saul. The Lord directed Samuel to follow to the place that he commanded, and he directed him to Jesse's family. So Samuel goes about this process of looking at Jesse's sons, knowing that the Lord has said that one of them will be the anointed king. And as we watch this unfold with Samuel and the sons, we sort of get a glimpse behind the curtain of how God is going to choose this king. Samuel looked on Eliab and thought, "Surely the Lord's anointed is now before the Lord." But the Lord said to Samuel, "Do not look on his appearance or on the height of his stature, because I have rejected him. For the Lord does not see as mortals see. They look on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart." Mortals look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. peeking behind the curtain and what God does has now gotten a little bit more difficult, because in order to do that, in order to know what's going on back there, we have to look at the heart. Well, we might be able to catch glimpses of someone's heart and witness how they treat one another and act towards each other. But ultimately, it's only God who knows the ways of someone's heart. It's God who will pick out that king. So Samuel goes through all of Jesse's sons, and we hear that none of them are who the Lord has set apart. They can't figure out what's going on until they realize, oh, there's that one more son, but he's the youngest one, and he's out busy keeping the sheep. We don't need to deal with him. How could it ever be that guy? But we know as soon as that youngest son, David, enters, Samuel knows that this one is the Lord's anointed. The thing I've never figured out, though, is probably something you might have noticed too in this reading. We heard earlier that God said, the Lord does not see as mortals see. Mortals look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. Yet, did you hear it in the verse? As soon as David walks in, we hear how darn good looking he is. Now, this son was ruddy. He had beautiful eyes, and he was handsome. And the Lord said, rise and anoint him. This is the one. Did you hear that? Yeah, the Lord looks on the heart, but wow, this guy's dark skin and gorgeous eyes, and whew, he was handsome. Even the Lord couldn't turn him down. I haven't quite figured out that part. Are humans so entwined in the writing of this book that even they couldn't leave this description out? I guess it's a debate for another time, because not only was he good looking, he had the good heart too. And so we hear that the Lord instructed Samuel to anoint him, pour the oil over him, and make him king. So after we hear about how God is working there, we turn to this gospel story where, again, we get caught up in trying to separate ourselves from the ways that humans see and want to know versus how God sees. We hear this healing of the blind man. From the very beginning, the disciples were focusing on the wrong thing. They said, Rabbi, who sinned? This man or his parents, that he was born blind? Obviously, there's a reason why this person is the way he is. At least that's what they thought. He's not a whole person. He's not like us. So obviously, he or someone he knows has done something to cause him to be like this, for God to punish him in this way and make him be blind. But it's without hesitation that Jesus spits on the ground, he makes the mud, he rubs it on his eyes, he tells him to go wash, and the man comes back able to see. We could see this as a miracle story, how Jesus brings healing and wholeness to somebody. But when you look at it, the gospel only spends, 2 verses talking about the actual healing. All the other 39 verses that we hear are about arguing about what's happening behind the curtain, arguing about who knows for sure what God is doing and why God is doing this and why it's with this guy. Starting with those disciples, they assume someone did something wrong to cause this blindness, because if there was nothing wrong done, well, then that means we're not in control in this world, and that means that bad stuff can just happen, and we can't believe that would be the case, and that bad stuff might just happen to us. No, there's something more to it than that. But then once the blind man was healed, still no one would believe it. No one would even celebrate with this man at the healing that he received, the fact that he could see the world again. His neighbors didn't recognize him without his blindness. The religious leaders who were there were more concerned about how it happened and that it happened on the Sabbath day than they are with the restoration of a community member. Even this man's own parents were more afraid of the ways that the others might react than they could be happy for their son's good fortune. I think we're the same way. We get more concerned with knowing what's going on and with being right, with having full insight and comprehension and knowledge of what God is doing and wanting to know all those things. We're more concerned with that than we are with celebrating the good work that God is doing. I wonder how often we get caught up in the knowing of how things work, of knowing how God is doing these things, and whether they're being done properly, and whether they're being done to our standards and desires, than we are with celebrating the goodness of what God does. Even that is a struggle, though. Because I don't want this to give us an excuse not to study and search and see what God is doing and how God is doing it, and maybe even question why. But I think we also need this reminder that we might be better witnesses of God's work when we don't think we have it figured all out. The blind man did not know how the mud healed him. But for him, it was enough to have gone and washed and come back with sight to go proclaim Jesus' power and his belief in Jesus and his thanksgiving for what had been done. All the other details didn't matter. So what are the things that keep us blinded to what God is doing, because we'd rather know what God is doing and how we can be in control of that? Maybe a little bit of mystery will keep our eyes open to God's work, keep our ears open to God's voice, and keep our hearts open to the goodness that God has to give to us. And in all of these things, maybe we too can be thankful for all that God has done. Amen.